Hey, you know how sometimes what we think is healthy changes? Like completely. Take eggs.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the 50s, wasn't there that big campaign? Go to work on an egg.
Absolutely, the egg marketing board, yeah. And it really caught on.
Totally. By the 60s, people were eating loads of them. Peak consumption, I think.
Right. For a while, the egg was, the perfect start to the day, this little bundle of energy.
But then the whole story just flipped, didn't it?
It did. Suddenly, cholesterol became this huge worry.
Yeah. And eggs were like, the enemy. Limit them. Just eat the whites.
That was the advice, yeah. It makes you wonder what the actual truth is.
Exactly. And that's what we're really digging into today. We're doing a deep dive into what eggs are really about nutritionally,
Hmm.
based on, the current science.
Hmm.
Forget the old myths. We're trying to get to the bottom of it.
And it's so key to remember that those early worries, well, the science wasn't as sophisticated as it is now. A lot of those first studies didn't really tease apart the eggs from everything else people are eating or their lifestyles.
Good point.
So our goal here is to give you, the listener, a clear picture of where the science stands today. We've looked at a ton of research, including a secondary look at the big UK National Diet and Nutrition Survey data,
Okay.
trying to see where eggs really fit in a healthy diet, moving beyond just cholesterol.
Okay, so let's get into the good stuff. What makes an egg? Well, an egg, nutritional speaking,
Yeah.
because it's not many calories, right? Like 78 for a medium one.
Roughly, yeah. But for those calories, you get a serious nutritional hit,
Like what?
like 6.5 grams of really high-quality protein
Yeah.
and about 5.8 grams of fat, mostly the good monounsaturated kind.
Okay, protein and good fats. What else?
Oh, it's packed with vitamins and minerals. Seriously, we talk about rich and paid. Well, one egg gives you nearly 20% of your daily vitamin D
20% what?
and over half your vitamin B12 needs, plus loads of riboflavin, biotin, iodine,
And that's not even all, is it? I think they're a source of vitamin A, folate.
choline, phosphorus, selenium. Yep. That choline is interesting, around 83 milligrams per egg.
Why is choline so important again?
Well, it's vital for lots of things. Brain health, nerve function. It's one of those nutrients that often flies under the radar.
Huh. And compared to other protein sources, like chicken or fish.
Eggs often come out really well, especially if you look at nutrient density. So more vitamin A, folate, biotin, iodine for the calories you're getting.
And they have that complete set of amino acids, right?
Yeah.
Essential amino acids.
Exactly. The richest mix, actually, which makes them great for growing kids,
Right.
maintaining muscle as we get older.
Or even if you avoid dairy and need a good protein source.
Definitely. And, it gets really interesting when you look at some population data. A big U.S. survey found that people who ate eggs regularly actually had higher intakes of most nutrients.
Okay, that makes sense given what's in them.
But here's the kicker. They also tended to have lower cholesterol levels overall.
Wait, lower? That seems totally backward compared to the old advice.
Right. It does seem counterintuitive, which naturally brings us to that whole cholesterol saga.
Yeah, let's unpack that. For years, the big fear was eggs, heart disease, because of the cholesterol.
That was the thinking. But like we said, the newer science, especially in generally healthy people, paints a different picture.
How so?
Well, take the Australian dietary guidelines now. They explicitly state that eating eggs daily isn't linked to increased heart disease risk.
Really? Daily?
Yep. They say managing your saturated fat intake is much more important for your heart.
That's a huge shift. And wasn't there research even back in the late 90s that hinted at this?
There was. A major study looking at large groups of people in the U.S. found that for healthy adults, even those with high cholesterol already eating eggs wasn't significantly tied to more heart attacks or strokes.
So the direct link just wasn't really there for most people.
It seems not. And there are even models that try to figure out, what really contributes to heart disease risk. One model estimated that eating an egg a day adds less than 1% to your overall risk.
Less than 1%. What adds the most risk then?
Well, things like smoking, poor diet generally, lack of exercise, too much alcohol, those lifestyle factors account for something like 40% of the risk.
Wow. Okay, so that puts the egg thing in perspective.
It really does. It suggests the focus maybe was a bit misplaced for a long time.
So for most healthy people, the cholesterol in the egg itself isn't the main villain.
That seems to be the current consensus. We've even got studies showing no harm and sometimes even benefits to cholesterol profiles with egg consumption.
Benefits. Like what?
One study, I think it was 2005, found eating 2 eggs daily Didn't harm endothelial function, that's the health of your blood vessel linings.
Okay.
And another, in 2008, looked at overweight men on carb-restricted diets. Eating 3 eggs a day actually increased their good HDL cholesterol and lowered some markers for metabolic syndrome.
Increase the good kind. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the bad LDL cholesterol?
Yeah, good question. Another study, 2009, had people eat 2 eggs daily while on a weight loss diet. Their dietary cholesterol intake went up significantly, obviously,
Right.
but their LDL cholesterol levels didn't change, stayed the same.
Huh. So the evidence against that old fear is pretty strong now.
It really seems to be for the average healthy person.
Okay, so we can probably relax about the cholesterol side of things, but you mentioned we're looking beyond that. What other health benefits are emerging?
Yeah, this is where it gets quite interesting. There's growing evidence around satiety, feeling full, and weight management.
Ah, because of the protein.
Exactly. That high protein content seems to really help keep you satisfied for longer. There are studies around 2009, 2005 looking into this.
And feeling full is key for weight management, obviously. What did they find?
Well, the 2005 study found people actually ate less overall energy, not just at the next meal, but like over the next 36 hours after having an egg breakfast compared to a bagel breakfast with the same calories.
36 hours.
Wow. And another study in 2008 showed pretty decent weight loss when overweight adults included 2 eggs a day as part of a calorie-controlled diet compared to those who didn't.
That sounds promising. Though I vaguely remember seeing something linking egg breakfasts to higher BMI. Am I misremembering?
No, you're right. There was an observational study back in 2003, I think, that suggested that. But, and this is a big but,
Uh-huh.
in that study, the egg eaters also tended to eat more meat with their breakfast.
Ah, confounding factors.
Exactly. It's hard to know if it was the eggs or the whole pattern eggs plus sausage or bacon, maybe. That's why controlled trials, like the one showing reduced intake or weight loss, are so important.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay, so satiety, maybe weight management. What else? You mentioned eyes.
Yes. Eyes. This is fascinating. Egg yolks contain these 2 antioxidants, lutein and zeaxanthin.
Lutein and zeaxanthin. I've heard of those.
Yeah, and they actually accumulate in the macula of your eye. That's the part you need for sharp central vision.
So they're like internal sunglasses.
Yeah. Huh. That's a good way to put it. Kind of. And studies, one in 99, another in '06, showed that eating eggs regularly increases the levels of these antioxidants in your blood.
In both younger and older adults.
Yeah, which is really encouraging.
And didn't someone do an analysis suggesting that not eating eggs might actually be worse for eye health long term?
Yes, exactly. Because you'd be missing out on those protective nutrients. It suggested avoiding eggs could potentially increase the risk and healthcare costs associated with age-related macular degeneration, or ARMD.
Wow.
And another piece of research found eating 6 eggs a week boosted blood levels of zeaxanthin and actually increased the density of that protective pigment in the eye.
So again, suggesting a protective role against ARMD.
Precisely. It really shows how tunnel vision on just one component, like cholesterol, can make us miss the bigger picture.
Definitely. Now, you mentioned looking at UK data specifically, the National Diet and Nutrition Survey. What did that analysis uncover about British egg habits?
Yeah, that gave some really useful real-world context. First off, about 30% of UK adults weren't eating any eggs.
30%, none at all.
Seems so. Among those who did eat them, the average was maybe 4 eggs per week.
Okay.
But for those eating more, say, 3 or more eggs a week, those eggs were making a pretty significant contribution to their intake of vitamin D, B12, biotin, and iodine.
So even just a few eggs a week makes a difference nutrient-wise.
It does, but the analysis also picked up on a common dietary pattern. People who ate more eggs often also ate a lot of red and processed meat.
Ah, the sort of traditional fry-up pattern, maybe.
Kind of, yeah. And that pattern is often higher in saturated fat and, maybe lower in things like fiber.
Which makes it tricky to isolate the effect of just the eggs.
Exactly. So the researchers got clever. They compared 4 groups, basically.
Hmm?
Low egg, low meat eaters, low egg, high meat eaters.
Okay.
High egg, low meat eaters, let's call them the health-conscious AA group,
No.
and high A meat eaters.
Right. And what do they find comparing those groups?
The health-conscious group, the high egg, low meat folks, they really stood out. Their overall diets looked healthier, less added sugar, more fiber compared to the high meat eaters who didn't eat eggs.
Interesting. Better diet quality overall.
Yep. And their blood markers were interesting, too.
How so?
This health-conscious high egg group had higher blood levels of lutein and zeaxanthin, like we talked about, for eye health,
Makes sense.
and also higher levels of other good things. carotenoids, vitamin C, selenium, and an enzyme that shows good selenium status.
Okay, so better antioxidant and nutrient levels.
Mhm.
What about cholesterol markers in this group?
While they did have slightly higher total cholesterol on average, and this is crucial, the ratio of total cholesterol to good HDL cholesterol wasn't significantly different across any of the groups.
And that ratio is considered a better predictor of heart risk,
Yes,
right?
generally, yes, a
Yeah.
key marker. And they also found no significant differences in BMI or waist circumference between the groups.
So the take home from the UK data seems to be eating 3+ eggs a win can absolutely fit into a healthy diet pattern.
Yes, especially if that pattern is also lower in things like red and processed meats. It suggests eggs can be a valuable part of a balanced approach.
Okay. Now, are there other potential benefits maybe lurking in eggs that need more research?
Definitely. Science is always evolving. We touched on vitamin D. There's ongoing research into its role in maybe slowing cell aging and preventing various diseases.
Uh-huh.
Vitamin B12, possible links to delaying cognitive decline, maybe protecting against Alzheimer's. Choline, we know it's vital in pregnancy, but maybe also roles in protecting against breast cancer or DNA damage. We need more research there.
Right. And folate.
Folate's famous for preventing neural tube defects, but there's emerging evidence for preventing heart disease, maybe even depression.
And selenium, you mentioned that before.
Yeah, selenium has potential protective effects against heart disease, various cancers. The US FDA even allows a limited health claim about selenium and cancer risk.
Oh, interesting.
And it's relevant because UK intakes are often below recommended levels, so eggs can be a good source. Plus, ongoing work on choline and eye health. And we're still learning more about biotin and iodine, too.
Wow. It really feels like the egg is packed with potential we're still
It
uncovering.
does seem that way.
But are there any groups who should still be a bit cautious? Any specific advice?
That's a fair and important point. Generally, public health bodies don't set an upper limit for healthy people anymore.
Okay.
However, some observational studies have hinted that for individuals who already have type 2 diabetes or perhaps very high cholesterol levels, consuming more than 7 eggs per week might be associated with increased cardiovascular risk. It's not definitive, but it's noted.
Okay, so a possible consideration for those specific groups.
Yes. And also, groups like Heart UK advise people with a specific genetic condition, familial hypercholesterolemia, where they're much more sensitive to dietary cholesterol to limit intake, maybe to 2-3 eggs per week.
Right, so if you have specific health conditions, it's always best to talk to your doctor or a dietitian.
Always the best advice for personalized guidance.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. It really sounds like the egg has been rehabilitated quite impressively.
You could say that. I think the key takeaways are eggs are nutrient dense, relatively low in energy, and they contribute significantly to our intake of vital nutrients like selenium, vitamin D, B12.
Uh-huh.
And for most healthy people, regular egg consumption doesn't seem to negatively impact cholesterol in a way that increases heart disease risk. The focus has shifted more towards overall dietary patterns and saturated fat.
And we've got this emerging evidence for benefits around feeling full, potentially helping with weight management, and definitely for eye health with lutein and zeaxanthin.
Exactly. Plus, all those other potential areas researchers are still exploring: cognitive function, disease prevention, linked to specific nutrients. The science is still unfolding.
So the overall message is pretty positive. Eggs can be a really valuable food.
I think so, yes.
Okay, so here's something for everyone listening to maybe mull over. Given this shift in scientific understanding, how might incorporating eggs into your diet contribute to your overall well-being and long-term health? Especially if you think about it as part of a balanced diet, maybe one lower in saturated fats and processed meats. It might just be time to, give the incredible edible egg another look. Thanks for digging deep with us today.